All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from, and also for those who will be watching this on what we would like to call the rebroadcast. Karibuni sana to our webinar today. This is the AI powered EDMS, and we'll just be looking at how we can, transform how organizations manage, store, and retrieve documents. So, if you're here for the first time, you're very much welcome. And to those who are our loyal friends, we are on episode 5, right, of our webinars. And what we've been trying to do is basically, to try and fit three things, right? We're trying to have these webinars to help us to engage with our customers and with the organizations that will join, and we're also trying to see how are we able to educate and just see what's happening in the tech space with regards to some of the subjects that we'll be talking on, and then how can we be able to empower you to leverage, this particular technology that is available, just to make sure that you are able to achieve success and an impact. So that's basically the premise of this particular webinars that we're doing. And like I mentioned, we are in episode 5, and it's really been exciting to have you joining and us engaging and just sharing thoughts and ideas and just seeing how we can be able to better leverage technology to help our organizations to be able to achieve success and impact the way they would mention it. So yeah, feel welcome. If you're joining us from Nairobi, I know it's a cold morning, so I'm hoping that you have your coffee ready, your tea, or whichever choice of drink is on this cold day. Yeah, so just buckle in, yeah, just pick your cup of coffee and all that, and then just tune in. This is going to be a very, very informative session, or actually for you, with regards to how can we be able to transform how organizations manage, store, and retrieve their documents. So as you come in, karibu sana. And yeah, we'll just head over to, housekeeping, just to make sure that everybody knows how this particular session is going to go on today. So yeah, before we get started, it's just good to note that number one, this particular session is being recorded, and so you definitely have a copy of it in your inbox within the next 6 business days, so that you can just go over it and just try and figure out some of the things that were talked about, and probably get some insights on it as well. We'd really love, again, your engagement in this particular session. So please feel free to use the Q&A section. It's already open, and it's going to be open throughout the session. So please drop in your comments, drop in your questions, and also just to mention that we will be running some certain polls in between, just to so that we make this particular session engaging. So feel free to also participate in the polls. It helps us to know how, if we are tagging along, and also how do we able to pivot to that particular conversation, so that it's not necessarily one-sided. It's not a podcast. We're trying to do it as an engagement where you can be able to give us your feedback and ask your questions, and we see if we can be able to respond to them. Yeah, so that's just it about housekeeping. So again, you are welcome to this particular webinar. And today we would be looking at a couple of things. So our agenda today is sixfold. So number one, we'd want to look at what is an EDMS. What are the core concepts with regards to EDMS, and why does it matter? Right. And then after that, we're going to look at the classification of EDMSs, right? So there's different ranges or packages for different individuals, depending on the maturity of your organizations or the processes that you're going through. And then after that, we're going to be diving into the key features and benefits. What can modern EDMS deliver for your organization? And then after that, we're going to be looking at, EDMS from Sibasi's perspective. So what have we done from our perspective, and how do we visualize EDMS, in 2026? And then it's not just going to be a talk, it's going to be also show and tell. So we're going to tell and we're going to show. So we're going to have some time for you to see some of the things that we've done from an EDMS perspective. And then we're going to wrap it up with a Q&A session. So that is how our day is going to look like. And for those of you who are regulars, we've been running these webinars from 10 a.m. EAT, but we, from the feedback that we have received is that most people are actually comfortable with running them from 11, and so that is the change of timing. So if you're joining us, and if you're looking at joining us for the next session, so they will be running, from 11 a.m. And I think it's kind of like a trend, right, Amos? We've been doing this on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I don't know if we call them Tech Tuesday and Thursday moments, but yes, that is what we've been doing. So joining me here is Amos. Of course, Amos will be taking us through, the showing bit in terms of what, we've done from an EDMS perspective. But before his time, I would just wanted to just check his mic as well, see if it's working. Like we say in Kenya, salamia watu.
Thank you so much, Edwin, and pleasure, I think, connecting with all of us today. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I think this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's where I started my career. So happy to, come back to the basics and just talk about document management and how, your organization can benefit from this.
Awesome. That's great. And we also have our colleagues in the background. One of them is Annette, and Annette will be running, some of the polls and getting through to hear your Q&A and helping us with that particular session at the end of the day. So Annette, you can also just unmute and say hi to the people.
Hi everyone, my name is Annette and I'm in the marketing department at Sebastian.
All right, awesome. Now that we've gotten that housekeeping out of the way, I think the mics are working. I'm hoping that we can see the screen. Almost just confirm, because we usually have this particular technology challenge where you're speaking or you are either showcasing something and it's not on the screen. Are we good?
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. So I think it's time for us to run our first poll now that people have come in. And I think the poll is around how long does it take for you to find, kind of like a working document in your organization. So you can just throw that in there. Let's see what responses are before we actually get and to dive into this particular agenda. All right, the polls are coming in. Yeah, so how long does it take you to find a working document today in your organization? So we're trying to keep this as practical as possible, so you can feel free to just answer that there and let us know, how long does it take? Is it less than 1 minute, or is it that those ones for you need to call somebody who knows somebody who knows where the document is at, right? All right, so I'm seeing the responses coming in. I see 14%, they say in less than 1 minute. That's a very good organization, right? Somebody's using AI somewhere. Or probably they're responsible for the documents themselves, so they know where they're at. 71% are saying between 1 and 15 minutes, not bad. And there's 14% were saying just don't ask. It means that there's some pain somewhere with regards to, getting those particular documents. So thank you for taking time to answer that. That gives us context with regards to, how we can venture into this particular conversation today. And it's interesting that, we start from that particular place, because here's a reality check, human labor is reaching its limits. Many of us feel this every day. The Work Trend Index shows that 80% of employees and leaders globally say they do not have enough time or energy to do their jobs. That is very interesting. But also on the other side is that 53% of leaders are saying that productivity needs to rise to meet the business goals. So we are having a catch-22 situation here where, we do not have enough time to do the work that we need to do, but at the same time, we need productivity to increase. So in 2026, what we are looking at is a capacity gap. There's a capacity gap that is looming. And how are we able to fix this? So that is what we're looking at. In 2026 is where what we're projecting is that it's going to be an era of Copilot, it's going to be an era of what we call agents, right? So we would need tools and technology to be able to help us to bridge that particular capacity gap. And from an evolution perspective of how work has been, this is how the scene has been, right? For decades, organizations have been, have invested in technology to make people more productive. But until recently, technology mostly helped us to do things faster, not to think differently. And today we are at a turning point where the nature of knowledge work itself is being redefined. Before 2023, it was all about the knowledge worker. Technology was just supporting this knowledge worker to be able to know, with tools such as email, documents, spreadsheets, and dashboards. But the thinking still remained with the human. But now when we got to 2023 to 2025, we are now seeing the era of Copilot. AI moved from the background into daily workflow, helping write emails, summarize meetings, analyze data, generate reports. Those are things that now we are familiar with. That's the era of Copilot. But now what we are seeing as we're going into 2026 is the whole idea of agents, right? We're looking at now Copilot scaling and now helping people to be able to now, to manage what we are calling agents, right? We're having now people, programs or technology that are running autonomously, such that now the knowledge worker is shifting from just doing tasks to directing outcomes. And there's an interesting thing here that, an interesting quote by Joel Ramjon, and he says, Copilot is a force multiplier. AI does a lot of heavy lifting so the people we help do not fall between the cracks. Remember, we've talked about the capacity gap and we've talked about the need for us to have, productivity increase. And that is what we are seeing as it was in 2026, that we are going to be going into the era of copilots and agents, right? To help the knowledge workers to be able to deliver their work better. And you're going to see how we can be able to infuse these particular concepts with regards to what we're talking about today, which is EDMS. But then let's talk about agents. And sometimes when we're talking about agents, there's usually this particular misconception. What's the difference between copilot and an agent? A copilot is an assistant that works alongside a human, helping them to think, create, analyze, and decide, but always under human direction. So, things like your chat GPTs and all that, or your copilots, those are the things that you are using. So they help you to be able to, for example, reply to an email, or for you to be able to generate a document, or to summarize a document for you. So that's a copilot for you. It's an AI assistant, but it's running alongside you. Think about copilot like a PA, right? But an agent is an AI system that acts on behalf of a human. It's autonomously executing tasks across systems and only involving humans when judgment or approval is needed. So right now, as we're talking about, the era of agents, this is where we are seeing business shift from a tech perspective, that we're going to go into a section where, we have agents which are running autonomously, they're executing tasks, and you're only informed if necessary or when necessary. You do not necessarily have to do the repeatable tasks. And here's an example of what we're looking at, from an autonomous agent. So for example, we can have an agent that is, it's attached to your email. What it does is that when an email comes in, it's scanning through the email. It could be an invoice from a vendor, and it will go in and it will see that there's an attachment, and it will look through that particular invoice, and it will get the metadata, get that vendor, get the products that you is probably, sending the invoice for, go into the ERP system, system and be able to create the same invoice with the same metadata and then store that particular document on SharePoint so that somebody can be able to retrieve it. And so you have that whole chain done without necessarily the involvement of a human. So that is what we are calling an agent, and that is running autonomously. So it knows the context within which it needs to work and therefore does not need you to do that, because we know a lot of people are taking so much time. For example, let's talk about invoice processing. It's coming in, you need to find it, you need to go and recreate it on your ERP and all that. You don't need to do that when you have an agent. An agent can be able to simplify that particular task for you. So what we're seeing will shift is that, the problems will be addressed. Some of those will be user-led, some of the transformation will be user-led. You're trying to unlock innovation at the user level. You're trying to see what are the things that we can change at a user level, but some of the innovation is also going to be driven at an organizational level. And that is where we are going to see the agents working through. And the reason why we are talking about AI and agents and Copilot is that we are seeing that in 2026, for businesses to be frontier firms, they would need to have some level of incorporation of AI in it. If your business is not AI ready or has incorporated AI, then you're going to be missing out on some of the productivity and some of the efficiency that comes with a particular solution. Right. So there are three things that are at the core, of every frontier firm. Number one, we're looking at how do we deliver impact more effectively? How are we able to better manage stakeholders, and how are we able to do all this within an environment that is efficient and an environment that is secure? Those are the three things that we see, organizations put at the top of their mind. And we have this particular conversation in the context of how do we then leverage technology? How do we then leverage AI? Because AI has been a buzzword for a while, and we're trying to see how can we contextualize this into how organizations work on a day-to-day. So enter EDMS. And for this, I think I just want to pause here for a minute, and I think we can run our poll, Amos, just to see how do people currently manage their documents. So you can run that poll right now, and let's see how do people currently manage their documents in the organization. All right, you see the poll is out there. See it. Amos, do you have any results?
I see it's coming through. Most are on shared folders. There's one on full EDMS.
Okay.
Yeah, 80% on shared folders.
Okay. That then gives us good context for our conversation today. Thank you so much for that feedback that we're talking about. Right. So the question is, what is an EDMS? So an EDMS is basically an electronic document management system. And it's a software that, it's a software solution that enables organizations to, number one, create. You're able to, store, manage, track, and retrieve electronic documents and images of paper-based information captured through scanning. So the whole idea is, number one, you have a centralized repository for where that particular document is. So you have a single source of truth for all your documents in your organization. One of the challenges that people have is that information is everywhere. It's probably in somebody's OneDrive, it's probably in Dropbox, it's probably on email, it's probably, in different places. So you'd want to be able to centralize that. So that's one of the concepts, right? You'd want to be able to retrieve it quickly, find any document within seconds. Remember from our first poll, we're trying to figure out how long does it take? For most of us, it's taking us between 1 and 15 minutes, right? So are we able to reduce that particular time? The other one is security and compliance. We're trying to make sure that not everybody can access everything, especially with regards to, let's say, for example, matters finance or matters HR, right? You do not want people seeing each other's pay slips or people seeing, some of the confidential documentation that has been stored, let's say, for example, by HR. So you'd want to be able to make sure that you are compliant in terms of that. And of course, there's now the process of, automating. If somebody needs to sign a particular document or if a document needs to end up in the centralized repository, how does it do that? So that is what we're looking at from an EDMS perspective. So it needs to have these particular 4 pillars, right? You have your centralized repository, you have your rapid retrieval, it needs to, of course, be based on security and compliance, and of course, it has to have some level of process automation. Now, what we've realized that these are some of the stats, organizations are struggling to find the time. Just like I mentioned, time is reducing, but productivity still needs to increase. So how do we manage this, right? 71% say they lack, energy to get day-to-day work done, and more than half need more time to focus. So there's just a lot of things that are happening within the same time, right? We're looking at 67% say that they struggle with being innovative or thinking strategically, and 61% say they believe that they spent too much time searching for the right data or information when they need it, right? And so these are the problems that we see and we hear from clients, and even from the feedback that we've given, that these are the problems that we have, and how are we able to address this? This is our moment, right? We would want to see how can we be able to use EDMS, for example, to be able to drive growth, to be able to manage your costs, and to be able to deliver value. Segue into what we are looking at here. So some of the features of an EDMS, is the ability for you to be able to capture and classify, and also to have your secure storage. So remember that we've been talking about, you have to have a central repository, and you should be able to upload information from various sources. You should be able to do things around naming and categorizations. You should be able to do things around access control, who is able to read what, and then things around AI readiness, grounding your data so that we can be able to, leverage AI in terms of things around retrieval, things around being able to summarize or generate more content based on the data that has been stored within your repository. So those are some of the features that we can look at. And also, just to continue on the other end, just give me a minute. Right. On the other end is also the idea that you have workflows and automation, right? You are able to now do things like, sending, for example, a policy for somebody to sign. And after they sign that particular policy, that policy finds a way into your central repository with regards to, that particular policy. So you can be able to go and check how many people acknowledge a particular policy, for example. So that's some of the things that you're able to do. Search, retrieval, and audit trails. Audit trails are really important. Who changed what particular document when, things like that, and also things around compliance and governance. So we're looking at how are we able to set up this particular business process. Of course, things like alerts and notifications. Once a document is in a repository or has been checked out or has been approved, you need to be able to have those particular notifications and alerts. And also things around customizations, just now trying to figure out how does your business work, because each business has a unique way with which they do their processes. So we are able to even come in and do that. And also it needs to, things around how do you label your data, and how are you able to, poise your organization to be able to, be ready for audits, right? And with regards to anything around regulation. So for example, data protection or the Data Act, how long do you store, for example, your documents and stuff like that. So those are the things that your EDMS should be able to handle, and a rich EDMS should be able to handle all these things. Capture and classify, it needs to be secure, it needs to be able to handle workflow automation, it needs to be able to handle search, retrieval, and audit trails, and also it needs to be able to handle compliance and governance. So at the end of the day, you can be able now to leverage what we call a Microsoft-powered EDMS. What this helps you to do is, number one, you are able to work efficiently using tools that you're familiar with. You know, EDMS is now available on all your devices. You can be able to ask questions and receive relevant answers from across the document management system and other knowledge sources. So you're enriching, that particular search, and you're also able to surface knowledge directly into your teams and your Outlook. So this, number one, you're using the tools that you're used to, and it's able to now, surface all this particular information whenever you need. So you can be able to collaborate also on the tools that you're familiar with. And at the core of it, you have, it's secured by the right access. You can be able to browse and update your records. You can be able to create your documents, and you can be able to integrate with, existing and also future systems. And I think at this particular point, before we go on to the classifications of EDMS and also go into the demo, we have another poll, and I don't know, Amos, if we're ready with that. What's the biggest challenge you have with regards to document management in your organization? I think we're just going to pause there. Yeah, so is it finding the right document? Is it version control, approval delays, security and access controls, or there's just too much manual work? So Amos, I don't know how the results are looking like.
So far, it is we have 33% and finding the right document quickly as one of the challenges. Another one is too much manual work. I think it's balancing between the two.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's either two. Okay. I see we have responses coming in. That's great. Thanks. That gives us context. Again, the whole reason for the pause is so that we can now be able to tailor our conversation to address the needs that you have.
Yeah, I think that I'm saying that, it's around finding the right document quickly and too much manual work. That's where we have the biggest challenges. Hello, I don't know whether you can hear me. Edwin, you're on pause. Annette, if you could confirm if you can hear me. Right, I see a quick thumbs up. Edwin? All right, I can still see the screen, so it seems you're still connected. Okay. Yeah, so as probably as we are waiting for that, and maybe just to continue on where we were at, let me see if I can share this. If Annette, you could just confirm if you can see the screen.
Yes, I can see the screen.
All right. Yeah. So as probably Edwin, where Edwin had reached is around when it comes to EDMS, I think that's what we've seen in terms of some of the biggest challenges around when it comes to management of the documents within organizations is mostly around the version control may not sound like an immediate need, but when you have a contract or a set of contracts and you're trying to figure out what was the final draft that was signed, then that becomes a bit of a challenge. When you are looking for, once we completed these policies that are being signed, and there's a version 1 that was released in 2015, and we revised the policy. Has everybody within the organization signed the new policy? Then it becomes a bit of a challenge. And I think that's where you start seeing, along the other items that may not sound like immediate needs, over time you start having, I think, a challenge that you'd want to look at, when it comes to document management. But I think from the first one that we've seen that most of us are taking is around, finding the right document quickly. And I think sometimes somebody reaches out to me and asks, can you send me your latest company profile? I'm trying to find what was the last profile and the last updated profile from our end that was approved internally by the marketing team. And I know even within our team, when we are trying to generate or to do a presentation and to prepare for when we are engaging on long projects and so forth, then finding the right report that was sent or the status reports, that always becomes a bit of a challenge. And then the other side is on the manual work, trying to do certain processes, or there's documents that need to be signed. You need to submit a memo that needs to be approved by somebody who's traveled, but the signing is handled manually. All those are challenges and benefits of why you would want to consider an EDMS. So in terms of the classification of an EDMS, so we have, I think, what we would say is a basic tier, and I know Edwin had mentioned something around this earlier. So where you have on the basic level, a basic document management aspect, the first bit. And then as and this is where you have your OneDrive, or you're using whatever other solutions, whether it is Dropbox, Google Drive, and whatever. But basically, you're storing documents as soft copies somewhere in a, that is dropping in various documents. Then you have the second class 2, which is around now storage, but you also have workflows. So in the basic storage, all we see is you have this folder where you're storing, if it is projects, for example, you implement projects, then you have a project folder, and then you're dumping all the documents in. And over time, one of the core challenges that you start seeing with this class, the first class of document management, is where you're trying to find the status reports, or you're trying to find the contract for the project. Or if you are handling aspects to do with grants, then you're trying to find which grantees did you grant, did you give, and where is the final approval document. And that now starts becoming the next challenge, because then you want also to bring in workflows where documents then within this storage facility that you're using, you have some sort of a workflow or approval process that then helps to make sure that you're using technology to help you in the approval of the final contracts or final documents and so forth. Then you get, as you're moving towards this other side of maturity in terms of how you handle and store documents, then the next level that we see is around records management. When we're talking about records management, then it's around being able to have, for each particular document, it has also the metadata. So if you're trying to find a contract, or you're trying to find the invoice relating to a particular vendor, then you're not trying to, trying to remember, by the way, how did we save it? Did we save it as, and you're trying sometimes to search for the document, and then, it becomes a pain. But when you have this metadata that categorizes the documents, then you are able to quickly find the particular document that you need. And one of the things that you'll see, probably also we'll talk about this a bit later, is that AI actually uses the way you do your classification and categorization of the documents, and how efficient you actually do this, then helps the AI tools to be able to help you find documents faster. But also when you're trying to generate new documents that are based off your existing documents or existing documentation, then AI is able to know what to do and where to pick actually the information that you have. Then we go to the next level around enterprise content management, and now we start looking at compliance. We start looking at, should everybody within the organization access all our HR records, or where have we placed the certifications of the organization? Who has access to what? How do you manage the security and the various levels around that? And then now in the latest technology aspect, and what Edwin was talking about in terms of agents and so forth, then bringing in what we call the intelligent document platform. So I'll try to just quickly rush through all of this, because I know we want to see how this looks like in terms of a live demo. The first aspect I've talked about is just basic document storage. Whether you use your Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, or if you're using SharePoint, you're basically just creating a SharePoint document library and dumping documents in there, whether in folders or whether it's organized or not organized. This becomes what we would say is a basic file storage, and normally it comes in as a first stage because it replaces your physical filing cabinets, or where you have your network drives. And with network drives, I think one of the challenges that we always saw is that you either, when your team is outside of the office or working from the field, they do not have access to internal network, and either you have to set up a VPN, you need to deal about security, how do you make sure that it's the right people that are accessing this, or you now have that the team, when they're in the field, they just work offline, and then when they get back to the office, that's when they bring back the documents. Some of the challenges with that, of course, is if they lose the laptop or the phone, then whatever photos, whatever documents that they worked on in the field then get lost. And that's where now this basic document storage comes in as a first stage of document management. So in terms of bringing in centralized storage, you are able to just basically find documents by file name and date. I have a friend who, the desktop, the way you have your Windows or Mac desktop, dumps all documents there so that he is able to quickly find documents by just typing the name of the file on the desktop. But then, they become hundreds of files, and trying to find all those documents when they're not organized in folders then becomes another challenge. But I see that as one of the items we might say around just basic document storage. Then, of course, this does not have very specialized kind of permissions management. But if you're using any of these tools, you'll most likely have the check-in, check-out capabilities. I'll get to show you how this looks like on SharePoint, and also how you can do this on OneDrive. And then you also get the version history, because especially if you're using any of these particular tools, they all have an aspect of version history and keeping the various changes as you're implementing them. As you move on to the next class 2 level, then you get where we are talking about it's document storage, but now you bring in an aspect of workflows where a document can be created, then it can be submitted for review, or it can be received from a vendor, and then it's submitted for review, and then goes through an approval process, and finally it gets published and archived. And I'll get to show you how slightly different this becomes, because then you are starting to have technology assisting you in tracking, for example, the audit trail around if it is a business process within your organization, then this helps to make sure that we are able to track every approval process. You're able to audit, what happened. And in fact, if you are, the approver is out of office, then you are able to even send notifications and reminders requesting them to do the approval. And I'll get to show you a sample of how this then gets set up using Microsoft SharePoint and using what we would call the Sibasi EDMS. And then the next level is records management. And now you start going into interesting things. You start looking at how well the documents are, the metadata. You start looking at disposition policies. You start saying, for example, all contracts must be maintained within your environment for at least 7 years, depending on what your legal requirements are. If you're you're in the banking sector, then probably it's a much longer period. And this, whether it comes to around the governance and compliance, SharePoint out of box supports a lot of these capabilities. But then the next level of this is what we call now the enterprise content management. And in this case, now we start looking at, for example, the digital assets. I mentioned a scenario that we have for us is we are always revamping and improving on the latest PowerPoint template. We are always updating how we handle projects. We are always updating how we have our company profile and so forth. So as these items get changed, then you start having your digital assets. You want to make sure that everybody across your entire team uses the same set of information, and you want to make sure that there's collaboration. You want to make sure that if there's teams within finance, everybody within finance probably has access to some information around invoicing and so forth, and can see the latest documents and how they are stored, but this is secured from the rest of the team. Or you probably want to give projects access to certain team members who implement projects. So in this case, with the enterprise content management, you bring in your document management, you bring in the workflows, what comes as probably as class 2. You bring in records management around the compliance and retention policies. You bring in collaboration portals, and this now we'll get to see, using SharePoint as your core, that you can set up your teams, team sites, you can set up your intranets. You bring in the digital asset management. When we go for events, for example, in our use case, we always get all these photos. We need sometimes to make sure that we can retrieve them one year from now. We need to be able to actually access and be able to, showcase or even use them, for example, when we need to create the marketing assets and so forth. And the last bit is, of course, you would need to be able to see analytics and reporting about whatever is happening. Now, in this enterprise content management, one of the key interesting areas is, especially when it comes to workflows and automation, and I'll get to show you a particular use case, is that you get to actually implement certain processes. So, for example, we have a demo that I'll show you shortly around insurance sector, where we have claims that are raised possibly on a website, or claims that are raised through documents that are physically filled and brought to your offices. And once this is received, then you want to track that entire process and ensure that you are able to tell how long does it take for us to process the claim. As we are getting to, going through the approval process, we want to track any approvals, or we want to track the aspect of comments and all these other information that you need to track around the, and this is what forms the basis of what we call the enterprise content management. Now, this is all fantastic, but we are in 2026, and in 2026 now, the next thing we talk about is around intelligent document platforms. And in this case now, we bring AI. One of the key things that you'll see is that all of this is almost like a build-up. We started off with the first level, where it is just, you're dumping all your documents into a folder that you share across various teams. But that over time becomes a problem when you're not able to find specific information, the security aspects, the compliance, and all these other things that become a challenge. But if you are just using that as your basis of how you do document management, then when you come to the AI tools, when you bring in Copilot, when you bring in, the whatever AI tools that you're going to be using, then you start having a different problem, because if you have not handled your security, if you've not handled, templates that now AI can use, for example, to generate your PowerPoint decks, if you've not handled, setting up some of these things, then this getting to this level of where we are saying it's now intelligent document platform becomes a bit of a challenge. And I'll get to show you some of the core features and the advantages that you get with the intelligent business platform. Intelligent document platforms. And before probably I switch from this to the deck, I want to say that some of the key advantages that you would get with using SharePoint is that first, it's within the Microsoft ecosystem. So when you're using SharePoint, whether it is on Teams, your Word documents and so forth, all of that is embedded within the same. You still get enterprise security of your documents. The Microsoft search and AI, when you go to just the default search, you'll be able to find your documents. And it's because it's very similar to your Microsoft 365 ecosystem, it's a familiar interface. And of course, with Power Automate, we can automate processes. We can get to set up various aspects and make sure that whether it is stages of review and approval, that is very easy and customizable to set up. And finally, we have the cloud native, and it's cloud native and scalable. So you do not need to worry about setting up a file share server. The team is outside of the office. How is the networking? How do you make sure the team can actually access and manage to upload all the information of what they're getting in the field? And finally, the key things that I'll be going through is that it has the first tier is around the interface. Is we are using Microsoft SharePoint, modern sites, which means it's available and you get the same experience on Teams, you get the same experience on using your mobile app. We'll also get to see around the document management, the versioning, the co-authoring, and so forth, and setting up the templates. You might not go into the technical setup process because of time. And the next bit is around how you can have, your workflows and automations. And the best part about this is that it uses your security and compliance. It has this security and compliance layer where you can set up retention policies, you can set up sensitivity labels, and make it work for your organization. So I'd want to jump into the live demo. And one of the key things that I'd mentioned about this is that the EDMS on SharePoint uses two core technologies. One is the Microsoft 365 Copilot, bringing in the AI capabilities, and SharePoint. And SharePoint, more or less, behind the scenes, actually supports all these other technologies that I'll be talking about. And I'll talk also about and get to show you how this EDMS integrates with many other, solutions that, whether it is your Microsoft 365 Business Central or any of the other solutions that you might want to have automated, and it works for all your departments. So you'll have, scenarios that are specific to legal, you'll have scenarios that are specific to customer service, to your projects, or even industry-specific requirements. Happy to, unless there's any immediate question, can I switch over to the live demo? I don't know whether there's a question on it, and whether, Edwin, I don't know whether you managed to, I'm not sure what happened. Any immediate question?
There's no question? Yeah, mind, yeah, right.
Fantastic. Let me just share a different screen. Yeah, so fantastic. So I'll kick off by, let me see if I can get one of the screens. Awesome. Just let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So when we're kicking off, and I know this is now a very familiar view. So one of the key things that you'll see is out of box. In fact, this is using most of the core functionality that is coming out of box. Of course, there's a lot of customizations and extra things that we've added, but I'll start off by just highlighting that, if you've used SharePoint, then this should be very familiar, just having your either quick links on a landing section. And all of this is part of what we customize depending on what your organization actually needs. So you have for example, I mentioned about setting up things like, if your team actually does, for example, petty cash claims, then you can actually set up that through a claims form. And then once it has been approved, we have the document that actually goes and gets stored within your documents. But that is part of the advanced automation. The first bit that most likely you use is you come and have a document library. Most of the SharePoint sites, or if you're using OneDrive, you'd have a similar view, and you can go and create, I want to have either folders like this, or and where I see most organizations where we start from is by just having a dump where we can all collaborate on and have everybody accessing these documents from. So if you're using Dropbox or if you're using Google Drive, most likely what you're doing is one person within the organization creates a folder and then shares it with the rest of the team. And then you start having into compliance issues and so forth. And if you are on Microsoft 365, there's a very high likelihood that you'll start off from OneDrive. And let me just show you how most likely most organizations will start off from. So you'll go and have your OneDrive, and I'd come in and say, I have a new folder. This is going to be our projects folder. And then because I'm working with a number of people within the team, I'll select, let me just go to the projects folder, and then I'll say that I share this. One of the biggest challenges about taking this approach is that the management of it. So, for example, if you have new team members who are joining, the person who originally created the folder, unless when sharing actually chooses that, you're not giving full access, you're not giving the full, you're giving actually full access, then other people can actually manage. Then as people are joining the organization, you start having now challenges to do with. Everybody is accessing this particular set of folders that you've created. And that's where now it's the first level of document management. As I mentioned, whether this is a similar experience to how you do it using Dropbox or Google Drive. But then when you get on SharePoint, most likely when you create a new SharePoint site, you'll have the documents folder that gives you this capability. The good bit about this is that you can set up, your various folders here, and the team, and you just basically need to add team members to the particular document management scenario, and then the team will be able to actually upload documents. And now, of course, you start setting up and saying, okay, we need to have a folder for your projects. You need to have a folder for your PowerPoint templates. But then you come and start saying, okay, wait a minute, we need also to have a folder where we are storing all the information about our entire team, things to do with, for example, your next of kin details and so forth. The first immediate bit that you might do is create another folder where you have your staff details, or you now create sites. And I've gone into some organizations where there's so many sites. You're trying to find which one is the last site that we are now storing personal details of the rest of the organization. And as you're growing, and especially as you're collecting more and more information, that becomes pretty unmanageable. And that's where now we start saying that it might be good to actually look at, first of all, what are the teams and how do your various organizational teams actually operate. And then we come and set up, whether it is in this particular format or we create it in terms of the various sites, and basically just looking at who works with what, how should we manage the security, should we organize this particular information. There are various other aspects that we look at. For example, if you are in the financial space, you receive a lot of applications, you receive a lot of documents. We may want to make sure that the routing of these documents is automatically handled using SharePoint, and that's probably at an advanced stage. But then I'll get to just go into, I mentioned that you can actually set up the petty cache form. So you just basically, and this you're using what comes out of the box in terms of SharePoint, where we set up a form and say that I'm in this particular department, and this is actually a claim that is relating to that, and I select, and I say that it's related to IT. I did my laptop repair, and I say that it was. Now, this is pretty basic. And of course, I can go and select whatever the documents that actually relate to it. But basically, once I say I've selected that and I submit, it goes through an approval process. So that in itself can, once we have the actual approval process, then the final document actually goes and sits within your petty cache. So this is a sample of what has been approved. And basically what we create is, a formal document that shows this was reviewed and approved by the CEO. It looks like Johan is the CEO of this particular demo environment that I'm showcasing. This becomes, you're moving from just having a centralized storage for your documents, but you're now bringing in an aspect of approval workflows. You're bringing in an aspect of actually coordination within your organization. So it's pretty easy to actually have the reflection about how certain processes or who approved, for example, a particular petty cache request. Then, as I mentioned, there's another scenario. Now we start having another challenge. You're receiving invoices from vendors, and you want to make sure that you can be able to organize all invoices from various vendors into certain locations. So in this particular scenario, you could do this manually, where you go and say we have the vendor invoices, and then we are creating this and uploading and then recording this information. But this is pretty a lot of work. If you have to go into the invoice and then type in the name of the vendor and do this entire process, well, with the AI, there's a possibility of actually automating this particular process. So what I'll show you is I'll do an email, and for this showcase, I'll say that I'm submitting it to QA@Sibasi, and I'll say this is an email that now receives. You could see this as what normally receives all your invoices, and then basically I'll say it is an invoice for Edwin. What do I say? It's an invoice for what? Let me see if I can find one sample invoice that I can submit. Or Brandon, do you have one that I could use quickly? If you try to send to this email from external sources, it only works internally. I should add that as a caveat. Let me see if I can get sample invoices. Yeah. So invoice for. So I'll be sharing this particular invoice. It's coming from Kipande Creative Agency. It's an invoice submitted to Sibasi, and it has whatever the team is actually invoicing us. And I'll just do an attachment. Let me see if I can get that where I have placed it. And I say it's an invoice for services rendered. Dear Sibasi team, here's an invoice for the services. Kind regards, and then I say send. So basically what this is supposed to do, and this is where the automation actually helps. We mentioned that as you are moving on along the various classifications, is that you want to basically go and see the vendor invoices. We've talked about having the business process. That an invoice can be received. It is when it is received, it first becomes pending, but we might want also to have a business process of how we get to go through the approval process. So in this particular case, we want to make sure that this, as it's going through the approval process, also probably you want to notify the vendor that your invoice is currently been approved. Please expect the payment within X number of days. And of course, this is just to make the entire process of your entire business process, depending on how you actually do it within your organization, to be pretty easy for actual showcase. So in this case, let me see if it has been processed. Yes, so it has been processed. And what basically has happened behind the scenes is that AI has received this. So our email QA@Sibasi received this particular invoice, and this is what you tell all your vendors. This is in a scenario for invoices. And then the AI goes and picks the details about that and reads that particular invoice, and then classifies that, first of all, this document that I've received is actually an invoice, then goes and creates the folder for that particular vendor. And then in this case also captures all the information that relates to that particular vendor. So in this, it's just to show, where we bring in capabilities of AI in terms of assisting you in, being able to pick information from your, whether it is invoices or any other documents that you might be processing, so that it makes it quite easy for you. What you handle is just the review process and work that is actually human. Where you want to go into a particular document and actually validate that this work was actually done, or set up a business process for how, or even confirming with the vendor that this is actually what needs to be processed. Because of time, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I'll move on to show you a different scenario where you are actually looking at, I talked about having templates, and you want to make sure that if you're in the compliance team, you want to make sure that every single policy that is submitted within the organization follows a particular, first it has to go through an approval process, but it should also follow our branding guidelines. So what you can actually do within SharePoint is that you can set up templates, and basically you come and say, we have this template for how all our policies need to look like. And once we set that up, and if you need to change it, then you change it once, and everybody else uses the same. And in this case, once you set it up, you're able to actually, if I'm now setting up a new policy for organization and saying it's a policy around non-disclosure agreement or whatever it is that we're introducing as a new policy, then I can go in and just say, using this particular template, it has your branding, it has, and what it does is that it actually not only just comes, with the various sections of what would be filled up as part of what the policy is all about. When I give it the number, is that as I'm recording information about this, the same information is actually being recorded against your, the particular SharePoint folder. And as it records this, then once I'm done, I'll just do it quickly because of time. Let me see if I can just give it a name and say this is, because of nothing comes to mind, I'll say nice policy. That's not the best title. And then, whatever the dates and so forth, and then I can say this is policy 3 on NDA or whatever it is. So as I do all these particular items, I'm not yet, I'm drafting the policy about what we will require all our team members to actually sign eventually. But the policy itself needs to go through a review process internally by, if it is a HR related policy, then somebody within HR has to review. Then probably the CEO has to approve this particular document, the policy document. So we get to manage the particular policies from this particular view. And then I can say that once we are done with the drafting, say that this needs to be sent out for review. When the moment we say send it out for review, then it initiates a business process where I would receive an email address. And let me see if I have one of the earlier ones that as I was testing, I would receive an email address, an email like this that says there's a new policy that has been submitted to me for review, and it's coming in from Brandon is the one who submitted, and I can either go in and review and approve, or you can even set up that you click on the document and you can open it, and something about the connection didn't pick it up because of I do not have permissions to set up to initiate policy reviews. But basically, we are able to use SharePoint for this particular setting up of that particular business process and being able to actually get the approval. Now, this is pretty good, but the next level of how you can set up your, whether it is like in this case, I was talking about policies, you can see this is mainly around drafting of the document and how that document gets reviewed. But once we submit it for being signed by the team, you may want to know which version of the policy is the latest, and has everybody within the organization signed that up? And that's where now we start having these kind of specialized systems where we get a solution that is a policy management app that you can get to have the various types of policies, and you get to see which policy is at what version, what has it been signed, what has been submitted. This is now a view, of course, of an admin. But basically, I can also go in and set up that there's this particular set of policies. So if I select one, and this policy is around the code of conduct and ethics policy, there's the version that was approved, that was submitted out to the team to e-sign is this version. But right now we are working on a version 2 of it. So I can get to know what is the latest, and this kind of high level classification and storage of the documents then helps you to be able to actually see not only the tracking of the versions of the policies, and you can see this from tracking of the templates, for example, for your contracts, or templates for whatever type of documents that might have this kind of business process. But also besides that, you can also go in and, for example, for this particular one, see that one was submitted and signed, and I can go into it if I want to see more details and see, oh, wait a minute, one was submitted, it was signed. Who was this within the team that actually signed? Are there any external team members that are required to actually sign? You have your subcontractors and so forth. Then you can be able to actually see whether it is now in this particular use case of your policy, HR policies, then you can be able to see who exactly has actioned a particular scenario. In fact, this is a use case that you might want to consider, where you have a scenario where you have your memos. Most of our organizations use memos for either review of documents, approval, and this more or less is a specialized now kind of a system that helps you in setting up okay, we normally have this type of memos within our organization. When we are reviewing a memo before it has been sent out to everybody, then we have overall information about it. You might want to see actual responses, if people actually feedback on that particular memo. So when I open one particular memo, I can see what the memo is about. When I do printouts of this particular memo, I can see, you can get a formal printout that I can store in or even push this to actually be stored as a copy, as a copy for reference at a later point, but even confirm that once you have submitted, especially if you have a large team and you're working with many different team members, then you are submitting the memo, it was reviewed and approved, but you also want to know who has read that particular memo, who's approved it, within your particular organization. And that also brings a particular use case I think I mentioned that I would want to show you, where you have, like in this case, it's an insurance sector, automation using document management that basically looks at claims that are received by the insurance sector and gives you, first of all, overall information, gives you, of course, your standard items. But the best part is also you are able to see how many items did you receive, how many have been actioned, how many have been approved, and all these, including the documents that you received from the person who was making the claim, gets stored within your document management, and you can easily see even the status, such that if your team that deals with the customer service side receives a call and the customer is frustrated that, what is the status of my claim, then the information is all available. Now, I think in this particular at this particular point, you've seen that document management using SharePoint has many different types of use cases, has many different levels of how we can set up the automation, and there are many different ways that you can have. Whether it is your business processes, whether it is automating, for example, your policy approvals and who signs off your policies, or even in a specialized kind of a use case where it's not just about petty cash claims for internal team, you also have a very specialized process that involves, external teams. You probably process grants, and you have teams that you would want to know how many did we receive, what is the process of actually a review, any comments that are recorded within the team that is internal versus what is shared outside. All of that information can sit within your document management process. So I don't know whether there's any immediate question. There's a lot I can go through into finer details and get to showcase. I know at a later point we'll get to show you, a detailed demo about, for example, how do you set up your memos and how does this connect with your SharePoint, and how do you make sure that once the approval process is completed, the document actually gets stored on SharePoint. I'll mention one small thing before I move out of the demos. If you are already on SharePoint and you have the Copilot license, the specific Copilot license, you'll most likely get this knowledge agent Copilot that allows you to ask questions and uses the current context of where you are on SharePoint to actually give you feedback about whatever it is that you're looking at. Now, this was what was there last year. In current preview, and this is now the latest news about what is coming, we have the new agent, the knowledge agent that is coming in, that can help also in terms of organization of your library, or even setting up, your rules. The way we would have rules on Outlook, to make sure that if I receive an email from this, let it go to this particular location. This is currently in preview, and we are getting, I think there is, like in our use case as partners, we've already enabled it and we've seen how it works. If you'd want to see a little bit more about what is coming with this particular agent, happy to, you can give us the feedback and we'll be happy to set up that particular webinar, or even have a direct showcase about what is possible with this. So just going back to the deck, all of this, as we've mentioned, is first EDMS fits within all your various teams. So whether you are looking at how your marketing team organizes the latest in your organizational profile, or how the marketing team sets up, what is the latest logo that you should use, or if it is your sales team, you're recording information about your customers, about your grantees, about the various engagements that you're having with external parties, or organizing your centralized information about your team, your next of kin details, personal documents. All of these various teams can use EDMS that, if you're already on the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, you already have SharePoint, you're already paying for the license, and that's where the document management configured on SharePoint can become a solution that has a lot of benefit. But if you're to use AI and what is coming, to make sure that all of us are able to work much faster, or you are able to find documents when you need them, it's only as good as the data in which it is grounded on. If you're not already organizing the documents, if you're not setting up compliance, then you'll have a challenge. In fact, we keep saying that if you're to unlock AI with unified data, you need to move from setting up, you have somebody has some documents, organizational documents on their personal Dropbox or on their Gmail or on email, on a personal email, and start looking at having all that information unified and stored in a way that it is easy to retrieve. And looking at also the aspect of governance, especially as you end up scaling and adding more team members, to make sure that, as you're adding more team members, you just set up, that you are part of HR and that person is able to get the right kind of access without the risk of exposing information outside. Of course, with the Data Protection Acts across the various nations, you might want to actually consider this particular aspect. If you're thinking about, where do you start and how long does it take to actually implement a document management for a robust organization? So depending on the type of organization that you are, if you're in the financial sector and you have a certain business process that you want to automate, it might take, a bit longer for us to look at, when you receive a document on email or you receive hard copy documents and you scan them, how do we get all that information on SharePoint? How do we get what I showed you in terms of the scanning and using AI to quickly pick information and categorize it well? But if you are still, depending on the type of projects and the kind of engagements that you have, it might actually be quick for us to actually implement the document management, or if you need certain automations and business processes. In fact, we have many different types of solutions. I didn't even go into how do you organize your documents for your board, and that's around what we would say your board management. I didn't talk about your monitoring and evaluation processes, and that's where M&E comes in. And these are specialized systems that connect to your document management so that all your documents sit in one centralized place, but also bringing in the business processes that relate to your particular organization. In fact, I didn't even go around connecting now your EDMS with Dynamics Business Central and how you make sure that documents actually get to sit and get to be very well organized within your organization. We are Sibasi. We are an AI native and innovative technology company, and we hope to help organizations achieve success and have an impact. In fact, that is our core mission, which is embedded within our name, to provide services and solutions invested and integrated into your business for you to achieve success and have an impact. We are a Microsoft Gold partner that has transitioned into what we call Microsoft Solutions Partner. And we have quite a number of solutions, including the EDMS. If you go to cyber.c/appsos on this Microsoft marketplace, you'll get to see that solution. You can be able to actually request for it, and we can be able to get in touch to assist. We have three main categories of solutions that we provide. The first one being intelligent business platforms. That's where document management actually sits. And then we have Microsoft Digital Transformation, where we look at assisting you with your business processes, productivity. And finally, we also have the advisory and consulting, which looks at your IT strategy and roadmap. If you're thinking about these and you're not sure where to start, you can get in touch with us and we'll be happy to assist. So as probably as we finish this up, I'd want to probably share, and I don't know whether Edwin, we can share just the last question around, what do you think about EDMS? Is it something that you'd want to consider? Where are you at, within your organization? And is it, is it something that you would want us to connect on? And probably also a slightly different question is around, how has the engagement been so far? If you've managed to join more than one of our engagements, and we would want to hear your feedback through this. If you can go to ciba.c/feedback, webinar feedback, then it will be great. Or even if you go to /feedback, it will be a general form where you can give us feedback. But yeah, it will be happy to see what describes your next step after this webinar. I don't know whether, Edwin, there's any particular other item that you'd want me to highlight before probably we formally close. I know we have about 15 minutes to the end of the webinar, so happy to handle any Q&A from this particular point onwards.
Yeah, thanks, Amos. That has been insightful. Yes, I think the poll is coming in. The results are coming in. That's okay. Cool. In terms of, I think we need to just mention that, with regards to EDMS, it's really usually connected and integrated with most of the enterprise or our day-to-day system applications, right? So if you're using your ERP, there's usually a need for you to store your documents somewhere. For HR, if they have an HR system, there's therefore need to store your documents somewhere. So we'd find that most organizations, you have different repositories for all these things, and that also now makes it a little bit difficult in terms of also now trying to put in AI to be able to start consolidating all that information across. So it will be a good it's a good practice, to be able to now start figuring out how you're able to build a central repository around it. And the good fact that you mentioned is the fact that this comes with, number one, you can build this on SharePoint. And SharePoint is already coming through with the licenses that most organizations are using. So if you're on M365, Business Basic, Standard, Premium, or if you're in the E3, E5s, you already have SharePoint, as one of the, platforms that you can be able to utilize. Then now you can be able to extend the automation using things like Power Automate. All this is sitting within your Microsoft ecosystem. So number one, like you said, your security is guaranteed, compliance is guaranteed. There's a lot of things that you can scale on around there. So it's a good place to start. Let's see how is your organization using SharePoint? Is it using it in the various classifications that we mentioned? And if you are needing any help with regards to taking that particular conversation to the next level, then you can feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I wanted to put out there.
Fantastic. I see there probably isn't any immediate question, but I think, Edwin, it might be a good time to also mention some of the latest news about what we've seen so far the last week from Microsoft. I know I have one with a new license category that
right.
Is, I think it's Microsoft 365 E7. It's bringing in all the AI and the security aspects. So we used to have E5, and then you needed to also get Copilot, Copilot Business, so that your Copilot Enterprise, I would say, so that you are able to get AI capabilities along with your premium security. There's a new license that combines these aspects. It's very new. I think it was just announced, I think, last week. That's Microsoft 365 E7, a very new category. You might want to check it out if you're interested in knowing more about it. I'm happy to connect and just tell you more about that particular one. I don't know whether, Edwin, you have any key takeaways or that is latest also from Microsoft. I know I also mentioned about the knowledge agents. That is still in preview. Last week, we were celebrating SharePoint at 25. It was a big celebration. It was fantastic. Just looking at SharePoint has come a long way. And SharePoint supports most of the core systems that you'll find on the Microsoft ecosystem. When you're using OneDrive, that's actually SharePoint. When you're using a Power Platform, that's actually behind the scenes when you're storing documents, that uses SharePoint. And there's a lot of capabilities. Loop stores, your Loop components on SharePoint. Teams, when you create a new team, the documents are stored on SharePoint. So it has come a long way. You don't hear about it a lot, but it's interesting that for us, we've been using it primarily as a document management solution, and there's customizations and additional value that we've done on SharePoint to make sure that you can support a lot of these capabilities as I showcased. But if you'd want to see more about this and all the knowledge agents that are coming on, happy to also get to showcase more about this. I don't know whether, Edwin, you have any other latest news and upcoming good things from Microsoft from our side.
Might not be latest, but just the fact that Microsoft is currently running a discount program with regards to Copilot and your licenses for business standard business premium. If we could just share the screen here so that we get to see that. So if any organization is looking at utilizing things around Copilot, because we've talked about Copilot, and really we are in the age of Copilot and agents. For you to now start taking advantage of that on top of your licenses, there's some discount that Microsoft is running. So if you have business premium, you can be able to combine that with Copilot at the price of $32. And if you are running business standard, you can be able to do that at the price of $22. So that combines both your business standard licenses as well as Copilot on top of that. Then that allows you to be able to start doing some of the neat stuff that you've seen us be able to showcase here. And I think we also had, just for those who might not have joined the previous webinars, we had a session on Copilot last week, and just the fancy things that we are able to do with Copilot to be able to increase your productivity and efficiency as an organization. So that's one thing that we are really trying to push out. But also this can help us now start imagining how your businesses can do things differently. For example, invoice automation and things around the metadata, preparing for presentations and stuff like that. Once you start using this, I think you won't go back. You will see the value almost instantly. Yeah. So I think if your organization is thinking about it, I think right now is a good time for you to jump on this particular promotion. You should be able to, you can talk to us. We'll be able to provide you with that particular data, right, in terms of the licenses. So feel free to hit us up, and then we'll be able to connect you with that. Yeah, I think that's the latest that I have for now.
That's a good catch. Yeah. And this is a commercial pricing. If you need
Yes.
to see this as non-profit pricing, you can reach out to us and can send you a quote just to see how that looks like. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that are coming from Microsoft on this particular sector. So if you want to see, what else you can do, happy to connect. So I don't know whether there is any immediate question around EDMS and what you can do. That before we probably close off, as we. Yeah, I'm seeing there's no Q&A, and also there's no Annette. Anything that we might have missed, maybe in the chat as we were presenting.
No question.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we really appreciate. I've seen most of us. We are fans.
Loyal
exciting.
fans.
Yeah, we are going to do as many as we can. I know sometimes we get engaged a bit on projects and so forth, but this is one initiative that we are keen on carrying forward and just sharing as much information about various solutions. There's one coming also on Thursday. If you'd want to see more about, I think especially the one for Thursday, we are going into, now looking at analytics. I think the previous aspects that we've been looking at is document management. We've looked at Business Central, and we've been showcasing a bit of, what you can do with reporting. But the one on Thursday is going to be exciting. Now, deep dive into this Power BI. We've done also what we call dashboard in a day, where we do training from morning till evening, and we get to go through step by step. How do you get to create your reports? But this will be like a live showcase of what you can do in finance sector, what you can do in, for your compliance, what you can do, and just getting to see, exciting things around the reporting and what really Power BI can do. And not just Power BI, there's also another solution called Fabric. We'll be talking about that this coming Thursday. There's a lot more. I think if you go to sibasi.academy or siba.c/academy, you'll get to see all the upcoming webinars. I think we have quite a number before the end of the month. For those who are in the nonprofit sector, I need to announce that, yes, there's one that we are going to be doing that covers quite a lot, along with the team. We are going to be having a number of external presenters. So if you can join that one, I think it should be on 19th of March. It's going to be an interesting one. I know Microsoft are bringing in a number of team members from various regions. It's going to be an exciting one. I think that one is on the 19th of March, but we still have others that are a build up to that particular big one on the 19th of March. Again, thank you so much. I hope you'll get probably about 8 minutes back to your day. We really appreciate you making the time. And asante sana. Edwin, anything else?
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And of course, like you've said, we are running this probably every Tuesday and Thursday. So see you on Thursday for episode 6, which we're looking about Power BI and analytics. So until then, have a good one.